Hey guys, I'm Erin and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm doing my September wrap up. Unfortunately in September I end up having to skip doing my mid-month wrap up just with like personal life scheduling reasons. I couldn't film all the videos I wanted and that was the one that got cut. So I'll try to keep this not rambly and getting them all in September, and my plan is to go back to mid-month in October because I definitely enjoyed splitting it up that way and being able to talk about books a little bit longer without fearing a horribly long video to edit or for you to watch. So also, I gotta say, Past Self also did me dirty this month because I was going through all my Goodreads pages for all the books for the month, like review the things I had written when I read them, and I definitely didn't write things for many of these books, which is a bummer. So yeah, past me did current me dirty with that one. But in the month of September, I read 15 books and I DNF'd one book. And this was really the month of books that I enjoyed but didn't love because I had 11 4-star books. And it feels weird to complain about that, but towards the end of the month, I was like, I just want one of these to be a 5-star. like give me one to love. And so I did start October with a 5-star, spoiler, so just didn't quite make it into the September one, I guess. But in addition to those 4 stars, or those 4-star books, I also had one star, one 2-star, one 3-star, and one 5-star. So starting with my least favorite up to the first favorite, I am going to first talk about the DNF, which was My Summer Darlings by Cobb. This is a mystery thriller that is about a small town in Texas and some women, like a circle of friends, and this mysterious new guy that shows up. And that's kind of all I got. That's kind of all I got into the story. I didn't really get farther than that. But this one, I just like didn't get into it. Like I'd been reading it for like a few days and I just like never wanted to pick it up and I didn't really care what was happening. So I decided to just stop. I just stopped and returned it and then moved on. So not really much to say there. Just didn't get into it, which is unfortunate because I really enjoyed May Cobb's previous book, The Hunting Wife. So I was looking forward to this one, but this one just didn't hook me. So then moving on to my 1-star book, and I do not 1-star books very often. I rarely do. And when I do, it's usually because I just horribly detested everything about it. So this is probably my most positive 1-star, in that the depth of my feelings towards it were not like horribly detest, but I also just did not like a single thing in it. And that would be Just Another Love Song by Kerry Winfrey. I was very excited about this one because the premise reminds me of a Hallmark style Christmas movie I like a lot called Christmas in the Smokies, in which we have small town second chance romance where it's like 20 years later and there's this high school couple that split up when the male love interest left town and became a famous singer, and our female character stayed in town, and now 20 years later the male love interest is back and they kind of rekindle the romance. I like that premise. That's the movie, and the book has that. And then also in the book, the male lead is a country singer, and I both have been wanting to read more books with singers or musician characters, as well as I love country music, so I was excited about it being specifically a country singer. And so I was looking forward to for this reason, and we just wasn't it. Just wasn't it. So the small town setting, I'm usually down for a small town setting, but this one felt like the author really, really wanted to remind you that they were in a small town with all of its quirks and really leaned into it and would not let you forget that this was a quirky small town. And I was like, I get it. I get it. I get it. So it was annoying. And then I did not like our main character. The kind of original high school or post high school breakup was her initiating it kind of through her decisions, and I got it. Like, it was very much, she was an insecure 18-year-old when all of her friends and her boyfriend had left town and she was left home alone, and she was just kind of insecure about it and got into her head and she broke it off. Sure, very plausible reason. But then in the years ensuing, she pined after him to the depths I have not seen, and I think it was supposed to be romantic, this like, oh, I've been loving you this whole way, but instead of coming off as like these like wistful memories of like, oh, the one that got away, it was just like so intense. It was like an obsession, and it was like not romantic. It was too far, and it very much painted, and like a lot of flashbacks painted her as like a martyr, and I didn't like that. I was like, you cannot act like a martyr here. Like, your decision. I don't know. I wasn't into it. Didn't like it. Wasn't romantic. Very annoying. And then I didn't particularly like the male love interest. This is the most positive thing I have to say, which is he was fine. I didn't dislike him. But I didn't particularly like him either. He was just kind of there. The two things we know about him from the back of the book, that he's a country singer and that he has a kid, plays surprisingly little impact in the story, which was a disappointment because I was excited about the fact that he was a country singer. And then also, he had so little screen time on this, or page time in this book, because so much of the book was her avoiding him because, like, embarrassment or whatever, because of the last time I saw each other, they kind of broken up or whatever, which is fine. But then they spend so little time interacting that, like, I didn't buy the rekindling of the romance at all. And then I didn't buy the flashbacks of the romance. Like, at no point did I buy that these people were into each other as more than friends. So, like, you didn't still sell me on the romance either. And then the third act conflict was introduced with 30 pages left. Now, romance authors, if you're introducing a conflict with 30 pages left, just don't. At that point, you do not have time in a full-length novel to adequately wrap up any kind of conflict that would be a well-done conflict. Just don't. Just don't. And this one didn't. It wrapped up in like 3 pages. It was just like, just kidding, we're good now. And I was like, what? There was literally no point to include that at all. So yeah, unfortunately, nothing about this worked, even though I do not have deep-seated hatred for it. I also have nothing good to say about it. So it's going to get a 1 star instead of my original kind of gut feeling of 2. But like, if I have nothing good to say, I can't give you 2. I have to have something good to say about you to give you a 2 star. And next up is my 2 star. Lagoon by Nnedi Okorafor. This is a first contact with alien story set in Lagos, Nigeria, where these aliens land off the coast of Lagos in the ocean. And there's these 3 people who have been walking by on the beach kind of when this happens that get pulled into helping kind of the alien ambassador representative character make contact with the Nigerian president to kind of like, make contact between species or whatever. And I did not get along with this writing at all. I just like could not. I just did not like the writing style in this. Bounced off it very hard. Sometimes it felt like there were scenes that were written in this weird over-the-top style, but it felt like it wasn't supposed to be weird. It was weird. I was like, is this supposed to be so over the top? I'm just like, what is happening right now? And then plot-wise, it felt like Nnedi Okorafor just stuffed in everything. And this book was only about 300 pages. It wasn't very long. It did not have room for the vast number of point of views they had, and it felt like she put in so many things that just didn't go anywhere. And it was kind of annoying. I did really like the concept of the aliens in this book. They were these kind of shape-shifting aliens made of these like bead things that would like kind of like down and like reform in different shapes. And I thought that was really cool. So props for that idea there, but the rest of it just like it's kind of a mess. Next is my 3 star, which was August Kitko and the Mechas from Space by Alex White. This is the first in a new trilogy about August Kitko, who is a jazz pianist who is playing in this kind of like end of the world party because the Earth is about to be wiped out by these big mechas. But when they come down, instead of killing everyone, they end up saving Gus, and then he kind of gets embroiled in like forming this kind of relationship with the mecha and then joining up with these kind of rogue mechas who are fighting against what the big bad is kind of doing, kind of deal. And I think I've realized Alex White might just not be the author for me. I had similar problems with this one that I had with their previous novel I had read, The Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. And that first off, I just like never felt attached to the characters. I didn't particularly like them either. Like there's 2 point of view characters in this one. August, who's the pianist. I liked him a little better than the second point of view character, Ardent, who I just didn't enjoy reading their point of view chapters. I just like didn't enjoy like reading their voice and kind of I just wasn't into it. I liked August chapters a little bit better because at least I felt like the main plot was more in August chapters. And then also there was a very much shoehorned romance into this one, which I had that problem in the last book I read by them, where the romance just felt very shoehorned in. In this case, it's August and Ardent, and for them, I just didn't get it. They kind of like at the very beginning they like banged and like it's about at the end of the world's about to end. Let's have one last bang before we go out kind of thing. And it was kind of just because they were there. They didn't like really know each other. There wasn't like I'm really into you. It was just kind of like you're here. And we went from that to then the world didn't end, and now they all of a sudden like super sappy in love, and I'm just like, I don't get it. Like you just kind of like flipped a switch and now you're like all in love. And it would have been okay in the background, except there was this large chunk in the middle where the main plot of the mechas and stuff got like paused to just like hang out with August and Arden and their like honeymoon phase vibes of the relationship. And I'm just like, I'm just not into them together. And it was very annoying to like pause the plot for that. And then when the plot got going again, you'd be like, oh, too bad we just saved the world. I just wanna be with them. I'm just like, ugh, stop. So I didn't like that. I did think the mechas were very cool. They use music as a way to control and kind of like commune with them, which I loved. I love music. I've been playing music for my whole life pretty much. So like using music in any kind of capacity of books, usually an A+ for me. And I just thought that was so interesting. And I just wish we'd just focus more on that part of the story and not the romance. I liked it better, but it was just okay. This book was fine. I just don't think Alex White's the writer for me. The other thing too was their writing style didn't totally click. It felt very over the top, bombastic rock and roll, which fit for the vibes they were going with, but as a reading it, I just didn't enjoy reading that kind of scene. The vibes of it reminded me a lot of scenes from the movie Rocket Man, which sounds weird because this is a sci-fi book and Rocket Man's a biopic about Elton John. But it's in the way that I loved that movie. But I just think that style works better as a visual film style and not a me reading it on a page style. But that's just how I felt about it. It wasn't poorly done, I guess, if you like that kind of style in a book. I just prefer watching that style, I suppose, than reading it. So yeah, just okay. I've heard a lot of people who have really loved it, so definitely, you know, if it sounds interesting, maybe give it a shot. All right, and now I get to my slew of 4 stars. So first up is The Bodyguard by Katherine. This is an adult contemporary romance about this guy who has a stalker, this actor who has a stalker, and so he hires Hannah, our main character, as his bodyguard. But when he's going home to visit his family, he doesn't want them to know about the stalker because his mom is sick, and that's why he's visiting, and he doesn't want to like worry her, so he has Hannah pose as his girlfriend when he's home as like the excuse for why she's there. Now, if there's ever a romance book, this is gonna be like number 1 on my list. If people say, give me a book that reads like a rom-com, this one reads like a zany rom-com, which if you don't like that, don't read this book. But I really liked it because I love rom-coms. That was kind of like my gateway into the romance genre, was loving rom-com movies first. And I loved it. It was like every aspect of the story had a little bit of a zany twist that was just kind of fun. And it was just a delightful book. I really liked our 2 main characters together. I thought they worked really well together. I was totally sucked in plot-wise as to what was going to happen. And I thought the narration style also was interesting in that it's not one I really have read a lot. It's mostly one I've seen in movies. But in this case, the scene in movies worked with the zany rom-com vibes of the book. It was like the character telling you a story later where they would break the 4th wall and be like, now you might be wondering how I got here, or little did I know this would come back to bite me kind of narration, which just worked with the rom-com zany style of the book. And then the epilogue felt very much like the Legally Blonde style epilogue, where it's like, it goes through each character and is like, X ended up living a happy life doing this. You may be wondering what happened with X character. They did this, kind of like listing. And I like that. I think it worked really well kind of as a full package for this book. One thing I didn't love was Hannah's relationship with her coworkers was definitely, it fit the zany vibes, but this one was a miss. This one specific zany twist was just a miss. I don't know. This one just didn't hit like the rest of the book did, but still overall very good. Next, I read The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is a really interesting mystery in that it is kind of a Groundhog Day setup where every day Evelyn Hardcastle will die. I think there's 7 total days, and every day our main character will wake up in a new body until he can figure out who did it, and he has kind of the deadline of that last day. He has to figure out who did it, or he will never release himself from this cycle of waking up in new bodies and trying to figure out this mystery. So it's also a locked room mystery because it's all at this manor house, and it's just all the characters who are there. And I had a really good time with this. The Groundhog Day setup was really quite interesting, and I think Stuart Turton did a really good job weaving together all these different storylines and all these different overlapping stories. And like as you got farther and farther in the book, you start picking up, you're like, oh, that's how that thing happened. In this previous, it was like pieced all together, and like the amount of planning he must have done for this must have been like astronomical, but he executed it wonderfully. And I had a really good time. I definitely was on the edge of my seat wondering who done it because I had literally no idea. I had no idea, no guesses whatsoever. And normally I like to like try and figure out, but this time I was just like, I'm just here for the ride, you know. We're just gonna ride and see what happens. And I had a good time with it. Next, I read The Wolf and the Woodsman by Reid. This is an standalone adult fantasy that is based around or inspired by Jewish and Hungarian folklore and mythology. And In this story, we follow Avike, who lives in this little pagan village kind of on the outskirts of the greater Meg Kingdom, and she is born without magic and is thus an outcast in her village. And when the Holy Order of the Woodsman come to collect their, not yearly, but like routine pagan girl for the king's blood sacrifices, her village ends up giving her up to kind of get her away. And so as she journeys with the woodsman, they get attacked and everyone is killed except her and the captain. And so she ends up trying to survive with this enemy. And from there, we kind of start unraveling more politics, so a lot more the magic is wrapped up in, and I really had a good time with this. This does a lot with exploring kind of the butting heads of religion, as well as kind of what happens when one religion takes over and that country wants to wipe out other religions, and kind of the political aspects of that, as well as like the people aspects of that, and the different nations kind of caught up in this. And I always enjoy folklore-inspired stories that have heavy religious elements. Like, that just works for me a lot, and so I enjoyed this one. And I think Ava Reid did a lot with this book plot-wise, as far as how much she covered in the plot. In just one standalone, we kind of see different points of this world, different like pieces. We meet a lot of different characters. It goes through lots of different parts of the story all in one standalone, and I thought it was well done. It didn't feel like overly packed, and good work getting that all in a standalone. We also have an enemies to lovers romance in this, which I had a good time with and really quite enjoyed. And yeah, I had a good time with this. I would definitely recommend this if you like kind of folktale, folklore vibe stories, and with romance and magic in them, as well as kind of the religious elements. Next, I finished my reread of A Crown of Swords by Robert Jordan, and this marks I have now caught up to where I left off when I tried to read this series. The first time, this was my last reread. Well, I guess I haven't reread New Spring, so I have one more to reread. But of the main series, it's my last reread before moving on to ones I haven't read before, which is exciting. And yeah, I enjoyed this one. I feel like I never really have much to say when I finish a Wheel of Time book, and I think part of it is, for the first 7, the plot are all just mixed up in my mind as to what happened when. Even though I just read this one, I'm like, what happened in this one versus the other ones? It's all just one big plot line in my mind. But yeah, there's one event in this one with a reuniting between two characters that were separated that I very excited for, and I loved and was very excited to get to, because I've been waiting to get to it. So very excited for that. I'm looking forward to moving on in the series, even though I know I'm about to hit the slog. So hopefully that won't stop me again. We'll see. Next, I read The Golden Couple by Greer, Hendricks, and Sarah Pekkanen. This is a kind of mystery thriller about a couple who ends up going to couples therapy with this therapist who has unconventional methods, to the point where she has technically lost her license to be a therapist, and so she can't really call herself that anymore, but she's also kind of like well known for her unconventional but effective methods. And I didn't really know what to expect based on that premise, but I was intrigued, and I had a really fun time reading this. This was another one that kind of sets up a lot of things. At first, you're like, what are all these things happening? And then they kind of all come together in connected ways that you don't expect by the end. And there's definitely reveals in here that I did not see coming. So overall, this was just a fun mystery thriller. It definitely had me hooked while I was reading it. Next, I read The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. This is an adult contemporary sports romance. It is about Vanessa, who worked for 2 years as this kind of assistant, housekeeper, fairy godmother, kind of do everything for Aiden, who is a professional football player in America. And then she quits to kind of pursue what she really wants to do with her life, now that she's finally in a position to be able to do that without having to have this other job. But then he ends up coming back to her, begging her to come back because he needs a favor from her, because he needs his green card. So he is proposing for her to get in a fake, or marry him for real as a fake relationship to get his green card, and they'll stay married for 5 years, and in exchange he will pay off her student loans. And I really enjoyed this. I love the forced proximity that happens in this book, because she ends up living in his big house because they kind of have to live together. And I love Mariana Zapata's slow burns kind of unfolding, especially since she thinks he doesn't like her. His gruff nature over in general just made her think that he didn't really like her. Like, he never said thank you, and she never really thought he paid much attention to her. And kind of as they get to know each other more on a personal level, and not just as a boss employee, kind of how they get to know each other and kind of get under each other's skin and kind of behind each other's walls. And I really love the slow burn that Mariana Zapata does in this. The one thing I think it kind of failed at a little bit was it did not deliver on the promise of the premise, as it were, with kind of the fake relationship, because they're married for real, but they kind of have to fake the relationship like there's certain points where, I mean, you're gonna have to. And it didn't really do much of that, which was a disappointment because I love fake relationship books. I wanted more scenes in which they had to be faking the relationship is really what I wanted. That's what I wanted, and we just didn't get a ton of those scenes. And I wish we had, because I think that could have bumped this to a 5-star for me, but I just kept waiting, and those didn't happen. But overall, definitely, I really enjoyed this. This and Mariana Zapata, again, continues to knock out of the park for me as far as slow burn contemporaries. Next, I read The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. This was kind of a wild card read for me. I've had this on my shelf for years. I picked it up totally on a whim at a used bookstore, and I just hadn't been picking up because when you pick up books on kind of random whims, they're like not ones that you're like, oh, I can't wait to read that. They're just kind of there. But I decided to pick it up. I was like, you know what? Let's give it a go. And I really liked it. This is a Dracula retelling of sorts. This is really, it's technically speculative, I guess, because Dracula and we have some vampires in this story, but this is mostly a historical fiction telling and take on the Dracula story. We have our main character who discovers this kind of mysterious book in her dad's study, and she ends up investigating this, and it's all connected to kind of Dracula and this question of, is Dracula still alive today, and kind of exploring him as a historical figure. And we end up getting 3 storylines, her, our main character, and then her dad when he first got kind of sucked into this, researching this story of Dracula, and then this professor he had who also had gotten sucked into researching this kind of historical story of Dracula, all through these kind of books and maps that are found that are kind of, the question that they're all kind of researching to ask was, did the historical figure who was the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula, did he actually die and was buried, or is he still alive? And so this was definitely very much a historical fiction take. I would recommend this for people who read historical fiction, not necessarily fantasy readers, because it goes hard on the historical here and kind of stories of Vlad the Impaler and a lot of the historical context around those times. I didn't know like anything about the kind of the historical context around Vlad the Impaler, who is in fact, like in real life, the inspiration behind Bram Stoker's Dracula. I didn't know like anything about Dracula or any of that, and I had a really good time with it. It was really interesting. It was also a surprisingly quick read for being 700 pages. I read this over a weekend. It was just really engrossing. Yeah, I'm definitely glad I ended up picking this up after buying it on a whim years ago. Next, I read One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I have a full video review that I will link if you want to hear full thoughts, but the brief setting is, I enjoyed this. I thought the gothic setting was really well done, really atmospheric. I loved the card magic in this, kind of tarot card-ish magic in this. Didn't love the romance, but I was really hooked by the plot to the end, and I cannot wait for the second one to come out. Next was another reread, and that was The Demon King by Cinda Chima. This is the first book in her 7 Realms series, and so this follows Han, who is a thief in this world called Fellsmarch, and he used to be the leader of a gang, but he got out of that trying to keep his sister and mother safe, and he has these cuffs on his arms that are these magic cuffs that he can't take off and doesn't know what they're there for. They're kind of mysterious, and then he also ends up in possession of a wizard's amulet that now has a target on his back because the amulet belonged to this really powerful wizard family who is trying nothing to get it back. We also follow Raisa, who is the princess, and she's kind of naive in that doesn't really realize kind of the real state of her people, but she really genuinely wants to learn. She wants to try better, and she starts kind of making her own path as she's reaching more of an adult age to do good for her kingdom, or her queendom, I suppose, all the while trying to thwart what her mother has in store for her. And this story kind of follows when their paths converge, when their 2 paths converge, and kind of a lot of the fallout from this, as there is a kind of war brewing between the clans where Han spends a lot of his time and the wizards, which are wrapped up in the court politics. And I enjoyed this a lot on reread. I think this was a 5-star back when I was in high school, but I probably give it a 4-star. I guess I gave it a 4-star now. I just think it takes a while to get going in the beginning, and once it does, it's good. And I'm definitely gonna keep rereading this series because I never read the last book, which is why I'm rereading it, but I still think it's good now. It was definitely still a good read. It just wasn't OMG favorite like I felt when I was probably like 14 when I read it. And I'm definitely excited to get to the next book to kind of see where these storylines that were set up for the next book are going to go. Okay, and then another reread was The Mark of Athena by Riordan. This is the 3rd book in the Heroes of Olympus series, and this is another one that I rated 5 when I originally read it when I was younger, but now as an adult, rating it 4. This one was just a slower pace than the first 2, and it's still fun. It just dragged a bit, and that's kind of my main thing. It also, and the first 2 are kind of squad of characters were split in like half in the first book and half in the second, and I was like, oh, I'm excited to have all of them because then I won't miss half from with half. But actually all of them was kind of a lot, and I kind of liked it better when there was fewer narrators in this book. It just felt a little bogged down, but it was still fun, and I'm still definitely excited to reread book 4. Next, I read The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. This is a sci-fi classic, and it takes place on this planet called Winter, where we have an ambassador there who's trying to get Winter to join this kind of planet coalition. And on Winter, the people there are born, I guess, agender, and their gender will change to male or female kind of during the mating cycle they go through, and they kind of choose one. And it's this book is largely a exploration of that kind of idea. There is definitely plot, but it's definitely an idea book where you're kind of exploring what a society looks like that when there aren't gender roles, because everyone will be either at some point. Like, you kind of just switch between them, and most of the time you are neither. And so there just aren't gender roles, and how that looks in a society and how that works. And we're seeing it through the lens of someone who's completely unfamiliar with this idea. It was a really interesting read. Le Guin's writing style just doesn't totally click for me. It didn't click for me much when I read Ursi either. My brain just kind of takes a while to like wrap around it and really sink into the story, especially since I spent the beginning of the story also I was kind of confused on how the people in Winter, like how their kind of gender idea worked. But then they explained it. We got about 70 pages in and got a chapter that's just like, here's what's happening. And I was like, okay, so my brain's wrapped around that idea, and it's finally sunk into the writing, and I enjoyed the rest of the book much more from there. And yeah, this is definitely one, I read it for a book club, and we had a lot of interesting discussion around it. So if you're looking for like a sci-fi book club read, this is really a good one to spark discussion. And yeah, it's just a really, really fascinating idea all around, and very thought-provoking read. I enjoyed it. This is also technically the 4th book in the Hainish cycle, but they're all standalone, so you can kind of read them in any order. But it would have been interesting, I think, to have read the others first, maybe just to kind of set up the wider world. But I definitely don't feel like I read this one and was like, oh, I needed to have read them. Like, I definitely understood. And then my last book, which is my only 5-star in September, was Ruby Fever by Ilona Andrews. This is the 6th book in the Hidden Legacy series. It's the last book in the 2nd trilogy. And I thought this just did a really good job concluding the trilogy. This was definitely my favorite of Catalina's trilogy. And yeah, I mean, it's the 6th book, so there's not many details I can say, but I think it wrapped up a lot of stories really well. I really liked how it wrapped up our main relationship in this one, and it was just a fun read. It was definitely the most, I think, engrossing of the 3 of Catalina. I don't know, I just enjoyed it the most of Catalina's, and I definitely think it started setting the tendrils for a 3rd trilogy, which I think I've heard there may or may not be one coming, but it's not going to be like the next thing they write kind of deal. It might be coming down the line, but it definitely got me more interested in that 3rd trilogy than I think I had been prior to this one. So yeah, overall, Hidden Legacy is just a really fun, I think really solid paranormal romantic fantasy, and I definitely recommend it if you're into that kind of subgenre. So yeah, those are all the books I read in September. Let me know if you've read any or what you read, and I'll see you in my next video.